fairly limited time to get through quite a lot. So I'm going to cut out a lot of elegance. I may get misunderstood in the process, but I'm asking you to give me the benefit of the doubt and then to voice your questions afterwards. But I want to start with an issue of perspective, because how South Africa responds to this current relationship with the USA is going to demand quite a lot of perspective from us. So the first perspective I want to share is the idea that foreign policy, like other policies, is like a telescope. It has two lenses, a lens of your values and a lens of your interests. And often a country makes its policies based on what lens it keeps against its eye and then views the other lens through that. I think South Africa has by and large held the lens of values to its eye and then viewed its interest and calibrated its interest through that lens. I think that there are definitely countries who would invert the telescope and put their interest against their eyes and then calibrate their values. So that's the first perspective I think that we must keep in mind as we navigate this relationship. And so if we understand that our values are the fundamental beliefs that shape our understanding of what is right, what is important, and what is desirable, whereas our interests are those matters that are important and necessary to bring good and benefit to our society, then I think we have something that we work with. And in fact, I would recommend that some of us get hold of this publication that is the framework document of South Africa's national interests, because this is going to be an absolutely crucial guide for us during these very turbulent moments that we are navigating between our values and our interests. And if we accept, as this framework document says, that national interests are those interests that are based on strategic ones, where our goals and objectives that are needed for our nation's economy and security well-being, that it would consist by and large of matters, for example, of defense that protect our nation, matters of economy that ensure the well-being of our nation, matters of the world order interests, in which we need a global system that facilitates our mutual protection and well-being with other countries, and that we also have ideological interest to advance the values for universal good. Now, if we accept those things as the perspectives of departure and the lenses, literally and figuratively, through which we view things, then maybe as we go through this conversation, we can begin to make sense of our navigational tasks. So the second broad issue that I want to raise is, what is this current moment in the US political life? I think in doing this, it is going to be useful for us to recognize the many continuities in the Trump administration that is inherited from the Biden administration. And so, for example, it was Biden that started putting pressure under his regime, that started, for example, putting pressure on AGOA for South Africa as a result of some of our geopolitical stances. It's a continuity from the Biden administration, where the resistance to the emerging multipolarity in the world started to be articulated. And it is from the Biden administration that we saw the very frenetic attempts to maintain US ideological hegemony, particularly in the way in which it armed, for example, Ukraine and Israel for that hegemony. So I want to say that we mustn't miss, through a obsession with Donald Trump, we must not miss the continuities from the Biden administration. But there are significant discontinuities, I think, that we must also understand from the Trump administration, and very clearly in the discontinuities, there is a disrespect for the institutional base of the current hegemonic order. We see that in the way in which the Russian negotiations are being conducted, that has very little or has a healthy disrespect for NATO, the sense about whether the UN, the United Nations, is as important, the bypassing of monies from the US, from the World Bank, IMF, etc., etc. So I think there's clearly that as a clear discontinuity. And I think it's also in our interest to watch whether that disrespect will persist and be sustained on the issue of the G20, especially because we need to hand over from South Africa to the US the presidency of the G20. The second discontinuity is almost that I think what Donald Trump is launching is an assault on incumbency, those who are in power, by mobilizing a supremacism against the incumbency at home, and I think I've illustrated abroad as well. So in terms of that, the supremacist assault on incumbency, we see it in the domestic politics of the USA, the MAGA movement, the Make America Great Again movement, as a response, not simply to a supremacist instinct, but to very clear data that shows great demographic shifts in the USA, in which the voting electorate in the USA is projected to become 48% white, and that the possibility of a majority of minorities is looming on the horizon. And so that needs to be factored in so that we understand some of the things that we think are instinctive, nativist, racist things. I think that there's data that, for example, would support that, that would go to this wall being built, the deportation movement, etc., etc. So I think I mentioned that. I think that there is also an export of the revolution. It's no accident that that Elon Musk has involved himself in UK politics and elevated a Nigel Farage and the reform movement in much the same way that it was instructive that on his way to the Munich Security Summit, Vice President Vance addressed the Alternative für Deutschland to strengthen them in their election campaign. And that then begins to say, what was the role then of Afrikaners in that whole makeup? And very clearly, it's to project white victimhood as a dog whistle, that there is a global protective movement that is beginning to envelop embattled white communities, or apparently embattled white communities. It may not be true, it may not make sense, but that is not the dog whistle that is being heard in a global white base. So I think we need to understand all of that. Another discontinuity, it's almost that they are putting a supremacist insurgency against the incumbency, and therefore we need to rethink our old categories of rationalization, because in that category, there are mainstream Republicans like Mitt Romney and so forth that are seen as part of the incumbency that are also embattled. And so it's an intra-party insurgency as well as a global insurgency and a national one in the USA. So I think we've got to get out of categories of thinking that are falling by the wayside, and it's forcing critical transitions in the world. This idea of undermining incumbency, it's firing and forcing transitions from a system where the incumbents violated rules and disregarded rules to one where there are minimal to no rules and conventions that are at play at home or abroad. It's a transition from soft impunity to hard impunity, in-your-face impunity. It's a transition from rules-based duress to punitive coercion, naked punitive coercion as the currency of exchange. And it's a way to deal with emerging multilateralism and shifting, for example, from a focus on BRICS, where Trump and Biden administration was very obsessed with BRICS as the locus of the multilateral movement emerging, to Trump being an equal opportunity engager, using power over the whole world, using economic power particularly. So I think that's what we are able to discern from this side. So the third issue that I then want to raise is, what is this power? What is this power that is being exercised? And I think the power exercised is of the shock and awe variety. It is one of the South Africans that are here in that kind of inner circles of MAGA, wrote the book, The Agenda, in which Joel Pollak, for example, speaks about the 200, I think, executive orders that must be prosecuted within the first 100 days. Abba, are you telling me I just have 2 minutes left? Okay, so let me choose what I then end up on. Let me summarize that one. I think the shock and awe is being exercised across the USA. We've seen Doge at work. We've seen the borders. We've seen the attack on DEI and wokeism, and we've seen social cuts in the USA. Secondly, at a global level, we all know that the stopping of aid and assistance, the multilateral financing system is brought down through, for example, anything that sounds like climate, like the JETP. The trade and tariffs is dominating the agenda, and the geopolitical. And then South Africa fits into that. We are not unique in all of that, but we fit into that because we are the historical antidote to supremacism, the success story of it. Our GNU, it's underappreciated in South Africa, but our GNU is seen as the second miracle of the democratic era in South Africa, that we accepted the defeat, that the ANC did so and formed the government of national unity, etc. So what are the strategic dilemmas and choices that I think we face? I think we have what is called the hot button issues, Israel and the ICJ, the Afrikaner issues, BRICS and the de-dollarization, China and Taiwan and the liaison office, the allegation of Iran funding, and the Russia-Ukraine thing is receding on that. And then there's the bread and butter economics, like the aid budgets that slashed 8 billion from South Africa at the very least, the tariffs and trade that I think we're being threatened with. AGOA comes into that very quickly. And then the question is, what are the interventions that I think we are looking at from the US? Again, in summary, in elegant form, let me mention 6 quick ones. The first thing is, stay calm and don't panic. I know there's a lot of panic being engendered because they see delegations coming to the US and saying, when is the president sending his envoys? I think we've got to let the pushback and the walk back mature in the USA and see what the town hall meetings are doing to next year's electoral projections, because that may do half the work that we think some of our envoys can be doing. And we do it too early, we give a distraction to the pushbacks and the walkbacks. Secondly, the Afrikaner issue creates outrage in South Africa, but it has created enormous self-mobilization behind South Africa. It consolidates our African base. It returns old allies who were disenchanted, for example, with our Israel position or our Russia. They're coming back. They're saying, no, 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 the attack on you is more important. This Afrikaner thing is ludicrous. And they're bringing, and new allies, like from example, Europe, are rallying to us. So again, don't panic in South Africa about it. It's working in our favor in the USA. Thirdly, we're engaging the lawmakers and we're putting in deposits so that when fear subsides of the White House, we have planted the alternative view. So we're doing that kind of seed laying work. The fourth one is let other formations that are coming here have their say. Let's absorb it. And they're not seeing high-level people, but they are high-level social media pushers. And therefore, let's absorb that message and respond comprehensively, not toe-to-toe, because that's the fight that we must avoid as the official voice of South Africa. Fifthly, let's hold, as in rugby, let's hold our impact players back, like our envoys and so forth. Because you don't come to empty doors. The administration is not yet filled. In State Department, there is no Africa division in place, no Assistant Secretary for Africa, Undersecretary. You're knocking on empty doors. The USTR has just been appointed. There's no Africa USTR. You're knocking on empty doors. So you've got to wait for a reasonable filling of those doors before you knock. Secondly, don't come empty-handed. Be ready to deal. Don't come and say, oh, we want to discuss this and explain to you. There's no room for explanation. You saw the Zelensky effect. If you prevaricate, you're a loser. You've got to come here knowing what's your top line, what's your middle line, what's your bottom line, and then put it forward as a negotiating strategy. Otherwise, you're a loser in this, and you're subject to the Zelensky effect. Secondly, or finally, manage the G20 handover, salvage that baby from the bathwater, because the healthy disrespect for global institutions may just, if we play our cards right, be the way in which when we hand over to Donald Trump after 4 years of global South leadership of the G20, there may be possibly one president that could reform some of the global architecture because he has a healthy disrespect for it. And so let us hope that in the idea of a broken clock being right twice a day, that we are able to manage how we do that. I'm very sorry that I went, according to my watch, 2 minutes overtime, but I'm hoping that there's enough forgiveness in the month of Ramadan. Thank you very much.
Not only is there forgiveness, I'm getting unpopular. People are telling me, allow the ambassador to speak more for